On the 9th October 1962, the Union Jack was lowered and the Uganda flag was raised. This meant that the country had an opportunity to shake off the yoke of foreign dominancy and take her affairs into her hands. It meant economic freedom, political freedom, social freedom. 59 years later, we are asking, had Uganda been a person, a 59 years old in Uganda is quite old, perhaps with an established family, with children and maybe looking forward to seeing grandchildren. Today we are wondering, after all this period, has Uganda achieved her aims of independence? Is Uganda independent? Has Uganda been able to shake off foreign domination economically, politically, socially? On the panel today, as usual, I have young people from diverse backgrounds and drawing knowledge from different spheres. Just next to me here is Mr. Kiberu Malik. Kiberu is a lawyer and an advocate for human rights. Kiberu also contested for the position of Youth MP in the just concluded 2021 general elections. Mr. Kiberu, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
And next to him is Judith Muvara. Judith is also a lawyer, lawyers, who just graduated from Kampala International University, looking forward to join the Law Development Center. She's an activist for, among others, human rights and environmental conservation. Judith, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to the Youth Roundtable. Mr. Robert Mugisha, just next to him, at least we have freedom from lawyers, is a student of business from Bugema University, also a fresh graduate. And we are going to be hearing from him on how far Uganda has gone. Mugisha, it's a pleasure to have you. The three are all having their maiden appearances today on the Youth Roundtable, and I can tell you that we are very happy. But we have some old appearance from Mr. Moses Kidega. Moses is the Secretary of Labor Affairs of the National Youth Council, and he also represents the young people of GLU. He never likes forgetting that, to the National Youth Council. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Moses. Has Uganda achieved her aims?
Thank you very much, Comrade Council. To me, it's always humbling to be here every Wednesday. Before we dwell deeper into this conversation, allow me to draw some historical perspective into this. The year was 1884 to 1885, when the first Chancellor of Germany, Otto von Bismarck, convened the Berlin Conference, which was also known as the West African Conference or the Congo Conference. The conference was convened in Berlin, and 14 countries, Western European countries, attended this conference. And this is the conference that legitimatized or formalized the scramble for Africa. And it was so deliberate to an extent that this conference came up with international guidelines to enable these Western powers not conflict as they scramble for resources and land in Africa. So this is the history that we are coming from and that we are seeing today. But when this conference sat for about 1 year, it was not time for action. And we all remember how Sir Frederick Lugard came to Uganda. But in their endeavors and in their advancements, they faced challenges.
Remember, you make it seem like you are there.
Okay, we have read about them. Okay. So we all remember how on their first approach to Africa, they faced, of course, resistance from some of these well-organized traditional and feudal systems, one of which was Buganda in Uganda. The second was Ashanti in Ghana, and the third was KwaZulu in South Africa. These were very organized African feudal systems that gave the Western powers, and in this particular case, the British, challenges as they endeavored to colonize Africa. But it is also important to note that what strategies did the British employ to achieve colonial rule in Africa, for example? And in this case, we shall discuss Uganda. When Captain Frederick Lugard came in, they understood that the best approach should be a commercial one, okay? And they established a commercial charter that they called IBACO, the Imperial British East African Company. This was to lay foundation for the British rule. Because at the forefront of their coming to Uganda or to Africa at large, they presented an ideology of, let us go and civilize the Africans. Let us take to them Christianity. That is why they used missionaries at the forefront. But yet at the back of their interest was actually the scramble and partition for the resources in Africa. So this history is very important, that we must appreciate how far this colonial rule came and why we find ourselves here today. But also, so when IBACO was instituted, we all know that at some point it ran bankrupt. And that bankruptcy is what made Buganda actually a foothold for the British rule in Uganda. Because when this happened, we later saw the 1900 Buganda Agreement that declared Uganda a British protectorate. So you can see that there were several stages of advancements towards colonial rule in Uganda. But you see, Buganda, a kingdom that goes as far as the 14th century, with, I think, a count of now 36 kings. The level of organization drew a lot of attention from the British and from the Western European powers, because they couldn't imagine that a group of primitive people can be disorganized, because we all know that Buganda had a Ruchiko, Buganda had, they had all the organized forms of any governance as it would appear, of course in the local context. But it was also important to note the role played, for example, by the Swahili people at the coast, because when Captain Frederick Lugard came, they entered Africa or Uganda precisely through the coast. And it is the Swahili traders who were used as navigators and tour guides to guide their exploration in Uganda. So that history, to me, is very, very important to understand that in 1900, Uganda, the Kabaka at the time signed an agreement to declare Uganda a British protectorate.
Okay, yeah, so I'm going to come back to you. You see, you're sharing history that's making me reminisce my SS and O-level history. So, but I request you to hold it a bit and allow me to now bring in Mr. Kiberu. Yes, Moses gives us a historical account on, you know, where it all started, and it's interesting to hear. Part of what I've picked from his mind is that, whereas what was presented is that we are civilizing these people and we're on Christian mission, behind it were actually economic interests. You could also maybe help us, give us a perspective. We keep talking about independence, but what exactly happened? Independence from what?
Yeah, I am so grateful to be part of the youth roundtable for my maiden appearance, and to find a few comrades. My name is Kiberu Malik, lawyer by profession, and a former contestant in the recently concluded elections. I contested for Youth MP. I'm also a student of history, and I'm also a student of political science and a candidate of PhD.
In international relations?
In international relations, Canada, or add that. I am so grateful that today we have time to assess our country, the road we have moved 59 years and before, to see if indeed it was worth moving or it is a dead loss. Between now and the end, and at the end of the discussion, the viewers will determine whether it is a zero-sum game or whether it was indeed a journey. On 9th October, we shall celebrate the 59th birthday of the Republic of Uganda. And we shall remember that 1962 is the year when we got the independence. So, Comrade Moses, the panelist, has taken us through the history, which was systematically planned from 18 to have our countries and other countries in Africa to be colonized. That's when we jumped out of the colonization to become independent in 1962. So I will start with the history of how Uganda got her independence.
Yes.
We saw in 1950s the independence struggle reached the climax. And we saw a number of resistance movements, Mau Mau in Kenya, resistance movements in Tanzania, resistance movements in Ghana, south of Africa, north of Africa, resistance, political resistance, military resistance to fight for the independence. But what initiated, what is that which speeded up, which sparked up these independence struggle, both militarily, ideologically, and other forms of struggle, which eventually led to the independence? We saw the world going to war in 1945, 1941, 1945 in the Second World War, where Europe was left in absolute poverty. Infrastructures were down, industries were collapsing one by one, and the economies were shattering each and every day. And that war led to the emergence of the so-called superpowers. In that case, we saw America, we saw the Soviet Union, which is the present day represented by the Federation of Russia. So in that case, the countries which were colonizing Africa, which Comrade Moses mentioned, the 17 countries from the Berlin Conference, were left bankrupt. Now, this bankruptcy, they could not, because they needed money. Most of the money they were using was from their countries to organize the ground and also take away our end riches to enrich themselves again. It was an investment. So their investment was destroyed by the war. And we saw the countries which cannot afford to take care of the home of the domestic politics, and also the foreign politics, which was full of the colonization. America came to the rescue of these European countries. This brought the 1948 Marshall Plan, which was to invest 17 billion USDs in the economies of the European countries, so that the European countries can jumpstart the economy again, pay America, but also to develop themselves again out of the war. So that Marshall Plan came with some of the conditions. Some of the conditions were that these countries, the European countries, should languish, should grant independence to some of their colonies. So this as a result, for Uganda in specific, resulted into the granting of independence. Because let us, having appreciated that history of how we got our independence, we shall remember that whereas other countries had the struggles, the military struggles, and groups to challenge the white leadership, Uganda never had that. It was more of boardroom resistance and political resistance which eventually we cannot say that it could pressurize the colonizer to grant independence. But after all those plans, because the discussion to grant independence in 1962 did not begin in 1962. The Marburg conferences, there are many conferences which took place in UK, and eventually they agreed that in 1962 we shall be granting of independence. But it came as a result of the conditions of the American Greater Marshall Plan, which was to ask them to grant independence to some of the colonies.
Okay,
because
I'm going to have follow-up questions for you, but you'll allow me now pick Judith's mind. You have heard, you know, I'm enjoying the history, going back in time where we were not. But what does this mean for you, who is possibly fresh from the university? Before we even assess how Uganda has performed, what is your own thinking about the colonial enterprise in this country? So far, very serious lines have come through. For example, Moses argued that the colonial enterprise was to extract, you know, economic returns. Malik is arguing, from what I hear, he seems to be saying our independence was not really struggled for. Yeah, it was handed over because the colonial master or mistress, if you will, was having their own struggles. And so you could pick it from there. What are your own views?
Thank you,
Yeah.
and my panelists for the great history. Now, you asked if I resonate with Moses on the extraction of it, the economic. I believe we still have the foreign countries come into our country. We have a lot. They give us a lot of money as dates. They come as investors, and yet they extract a lot from our country of minerals or resources. So I believe they might have handed over the independence, but are we actually independent in that aspect? So I believe we still have, we might be independent. Yes, it's a positive thing, but we still lean on them on very many factors. For example, we already have, I hear every Ugandan has a debt to pay in some aspect. I mean, we have a lot of debts to pay. So meaning from other countries, China, all those countries that give us debts. So I believe we have the independence, but we are not actually independent.
Don't you think, Judith, that, you know, having a loan, that's a contract. So it's two parties coming together to agree that you're going to loan me this amount, I'll pay in this way. You are equal parties negotiating a loan. Don't you think that's different from someone coming here and, you know, forcing you to grow cotton, to grow coffee, and then railing it away?
Or to even, they're giving you money with conditions of you have to, you know, rely on them, or their terms. You have to go by their terms of maybe you add the what is it called?
LGBT?
Yeah, that contract and whatsoever. Like they have their terms, which that come with their contracts on those dates.
I thought the loans are negotiated.
They're actually negotiated, but who actually negotiates those loans? If it's the minister, I don't know who negotiates, but we, the people, are not actually involved. They impose those things on us. If they negotiate the same and LGBT is into the country, that means we are getting imposed to those terms and not actually, we were not on the table to maybe allow those contracts to be signed. So I'm saying we might be independent. Yes, it's a positive thing. But
so what does that mean, that we might be independent? How?
We actually,
because you seem to be saying we are not.
No, I'm saying we are independent, but we're actually not independent in other aspects.
So that's where you
For example.
So are we or are we not? Yes, for example.
For example, that other factor I gave you about the dates.
Yes.
Because clearly we have a lot of public debt outside in very many countries. That, and the problem is whoever takes those who signs those contracts, they don't come to us, the people, to maybe ask for our consent on the same.
Parliament approves
It
those
does.
loans, and your country, your politics, your governance is organized in a way that people elect to represent. Of course, the 45 million people cannot sit to keep approving everything, so they elect representatives to Parliament who approve.
I don't think we're actually detached from the reality, because those people that we elect to go and represent us, they actually represent their own interests and not our interests. So that's how if it affects us in the long run.
Okay, thank you very much, Judith. I'll be coming back to you, but let's hear from Mugisha. Mugisha, you have heard. Judith has no kind words for our leadership, and she just in short is saying that this whole independence thing is a facade, it does not exist in reality, it's just window dressing. Is that your view as well?
Well, thank you so much. It is a little bit interesting to come after Judith's submission, and by arrangement she happens to be seated next to a former contestant, and when she says these people actually represent their own
yes, yes. Later we shall ask him.
we are about to find out.
Yes.
But as we dive into today's discussion, my other colleagues have done much on a bit of the history. We want to relate with history because I believe without history, it would be hard to tell our position and possibly to look ahead to see what we are going to be in some time to come. Not going back into the 1884 and the other factors of the factors that pushed the colonial masters to come into Africa, but Uganda in particular having been part of the political cake that was shared finally. We have what to say, and allow me start from around 1894.
History again.
Very much. I said you must be in love with history.
Yes.
My brother here took us from around 1900, and I want to believe, actually history puts it on record, that before 1900, actually as far as 1894, Uganda had become a British protectorate. When Uganda becomes or is declared a British protectorate, many of the historians and scholars at the time feel it is better, because compared to our neighbor Kenya that was taken as a direct colony, they felt it was more of harsh being a colony than being a protectorate. And so they argued that it is better, and it is a better ground for Uganda to be a protectorate, and it is, overseen, supervised, and all that.
Maybe you can help me and, in effect, the viewers understand what's the difference between a protectorate and a colony. I thought it's colonialism, it's just the same thing.
Well, it's colonialism, but the approach that is used and the means that are administered to the people may vary on those two.
Maybe can I come in shortly?
On that?
Yes, yes. I throw back the microphone.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with him. Independence had started, the road to colonialism had started a little bit earlier, because if you check in our laws, the constitutional law, we had the first order in council of 18 before the second order in council. So we already had the laws which we were following, which were drafted by the whites. So going to why Uganda became a protectorate and not a colony, it was a matter of discussion, because as Ndugu Moses pointed out, there are only three resistance, ideologically ideologically kingdoms which resisted the white colonization offer. They were well organized, they were brilliant, and they had a good negotiation tool. The Ashanti Empire, the Buganda Kingdom, and the Zulu, they were very thorough.
So how link that to
yes, I'm coming. They were very thorough. So the thoroughness of the Uganda kingdom, the discussion between the Kabaka at that time, he hesitated to have, because actually at that time we were negotiating on the level of Uganda, which was which later covered the whole country with a number of agreements, but he refused to have the whites to, as the bosses here, because the letter written the letter written by Her Majesty at that time was saying that the whites had come to offer what he called civilization. So the question they later asked, according to the person who is offering and me who is the boss here, who should be the one to take control of the other? So that's when they ended up having of course, after a number of discussions and disagreements, they concluded on having Uganda as a protectorate. Now, what is a protectorate? A protectorate is a territory which is under a protection of another country, not colonized.
Okay.
Colonized is a territory which is governed by another country. So
Okay.
that is the difference.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. I'll bring it back to you, and possibly maybe you can now help tell us whether was Uganda not colonized?
Thank you. That is going to be looked into in the match and fullness of time.
Yes.
And that's why we're here. And so as Uganda becomes protected by British, these people decide, as I said, the two varying environments. I like comparing much with Kenya. Comparing the rebellions that they were saying, and some people are looking at the tools that the various people used to gain back their independence. But by then it was actually not yet the formal colonization, but you realize you are noticing new people on board. You have been inhabiting a land for generations of years, but you're now seeing someone unfamiliar. And so the reactions to which people portrayed to these new beings, to these new faces they are seeing on board, determined which method to be used to deal with them. And so we must acknowledge that Kenyans were a bit rough and not so tolerant with them. They were so hostile. And so the British look at them and they're like, these people, they need an iron hand. And that is why there was no room for discussion, no room for, he called it more of boardroom meeting. That was not one of the languages they spoke then. And that's why they had to take a direct control and it becomes a colony, which is a bit different from Uganda, you know, which was more of liberal and engaging. Now, being declared a protectorate, proceeding on to the agreements that were later written, the 1900 Buganda Agreement, we later saw the Ankole Agreement, 1901, and the rest. The white man influence continued to increase over time in the activities as they went deeper into the rest of the inhabitants of Uganda in particular. By then, Uganda was not yet geographically bounded Uganda because the demarcations were not yet made. But with the time, the boundaries were drawn. Okay. And as this protection was offered first to Buganda because they were the ones that were welcomed, remember that story of how they gave them arms and guns, and then those that were against Buganda automatically became enemies to the British, and then we remember the resistance of Kabalega and Bunyoro. They were fought, attacked, which later in Frederick Lugard, and which actually, because they had come in a guise of Christianity and civilization, it later sprouted these religious wars that we cannot go deep into, because had it not been that, we would not even be thinking about matters and all that history behind us, which we must appreciate, but again have a big history to learn over. And so with such impacts being made here on our land, with time, it later led to the growth and agitation of self-rule. Because once you have a foreign man in your affairs and you realize that the effects are worse than how you were then there was need for compassion and resilience, which later led to the growth of the agitation for independence. we won't say that independence was that granted. I don't want to believe that, because even when it was to be handed over, then there must have been a sign of seriousness and a sign of willingness and being ready to take on that which is being handed over to you. I believe if you're a parent and you have a child that has grown, but in your own assessment as a senior, you see that this child is not yet ready to self-contain himself, even if they ask for self-rule and they want to be independent, I want to believe you will hesitate to grant that to them.
Yeah, but Malik, what Malik is saying is that the imperial power was so vulnerable that even if you are not ready, they'll just abandon, because they don't care. They'll just abandon and go. They had gone through the World War, they were vulnerable, they needed money, and the money had conditions of them abandoning the colonial enterprise.
You see, I always have value for opinion.
Yes.
An opinion is never wrong. It depends on your argument. But if that was the case, they would have declared all colonies at once to be independent. The fact that we receive it in phases means that we had a different role to play. And so back to end it up.
Yes.
So because these forces and pressures coming from both interior and exterior, by the time 1962, we see Uganda receiving self-rule. But as they are getting this self-rule, I see the Ugandans then jubilating, finally, we now have the ability to decide our destiny, as self-rule was described then. But even one thing that is very memorable that we cannot forget so easily is that even as they get this independence, some things remain remarkable. One, that the Queen, Her Highness, has to remain the head of state. And so as the Queen is remaining the head of state and actually appointing, I would say, because by then, anyway, it was called an election. Milton Obote becomes the prime minister and the leader of government of the newly independent country on board. And shortly after, in 1963, the Kabaka of Buganda then becomes or is elected as the president of Uganda. We now see a sense of shifting the leadership from the white man through the African people, this in particular the Ugandans, but still remaining royal. One statement was remarked, and I want to hold on it. On that very day, as they were lowering the Union Jack, raising the Uganda flag, they said, the Duke, because it is the Duke that came. So the Duke says, well, we grant Uganda independence, but of course, Uganda has been, is, and will be a member of the Commonwealth. And so Uganda remains under Britain. By history, you won't remove it because that was your colonial master. But that statement, I believe it meant more than it sounded like. Because like historians will argue it out, colonialists went out through the front door and your colonialism came through the behind door. What she was saying, that we still have people coming in, we still have loans from outside, we still have, you get. And so with that statement itself brings in the aspect of vulnerability of the young-born country, because you're still under the wings of your masters, you're still under the Commonwealth, you're still under the head of state, who is the Queen. And I want to believe that by the time we finish this discussion, we shall have expounded more. Let me not dwell so much in the introduction, because there's actually much to appreciate.
Yeah, thank you very much. And,
Yes.
and that, of course, sends me to Moses. Moses, you have heard the views, and some of them, of course, are clashing. And it's on one of the clashes that I want to pick your mind. It has been argued by some people that our independence was actually handed over, that compared, say, to our neighbors in Kenya, there was no resistance to speak of. But there is also a counter-argument that no, actually there was a struggle, and you took us through the history. Maybe you can tell us about the Bataka movements and the organizing that the IKM SASIS did with organizing political parties and all that. What's your own view? Was this independence handed to us, or did we fight?
No. I don't think the independence was handed over to us. I think we can discuss how much we struggled, but one thing for sure is we struggled for the independence. And you already cited out the Bataka Party that fought alongside with the Uganda African Farmers Union in 1949. Okay? There was an insurgency in the country. There was overwhelming disorientation and displeasure with the way things were ongoing in the country. And we saw how the ringleaders were later arrested in the same year. Okay? So, but you see, at the time, like you said, there was an overwhelming level of development of nationalism, and the need for self-rule was at a point where it couldn't turn back anymore. So even when the Bataka Party and the Ugandan African Farmers Union were banned after that insurgence, we later saw the uprising of the Ugandan National Congress in 1952 and the Democratic Party in 1954. So the idea of nationalism, the idea of independence was an idea whose time had come. So the struggle for independence goes way back as then. But also, we must take into account the resistance put by the Buganda kingdom. Yeah, at some point, and on this I will cite out King, was it Mwanga? I don't recall very well, who wrote a letter to the Queen expressing his dissatisfaction with the governor at the time, Sir Frederick Lugard, okay? Expressing dissatisfaction with the way the British were imposing the rule on the people of Uganda. And this later saw to the exile and the fleeing of this same king, yeah, who later returned, and he was overwhelmingly received by the people. So the struggle for independence, no one can hand over to you independence. Yeah, you must struggle for it, because for us to say they handed over to us the independence, what were they gaining from the rule they were imposing on us? They were taking away our minerals, they were taking advantage of our cheap labor, they were taking advantage of the fertile land that we had for their own benefit.
One of the arguments has been that the World War dismembered their capabilities and they could not hold anymore.
In any case, if the World War disenfranchised them economically, clinging onto the resources of Africa could have been their ideal position, because you want to now recover what you've lost in the World War. So you cannot relinquish a source of fortune. They were harnessing fortune from Africa and from Uganda. So to me, I disagree with the school of thought that we were handed over the independence. It was a struggle. And we saw the contribution of the Uganda National Congress and the Democratic Party in their own ways. Because the Uganda National Congress was, of course, it came into play earlier than Democratic Party, and its interest was primarily the struggle for independence. But the Democratic Party now came in to create the equilibrium that had been, the imparity that had been created by the struggle for independence. Now the Democratic Party was now there to try and harmonize and try to create an equilibrium. So I disagree with the thought that our independence was handed over to us. We struggled for it, we fought for it.
Okay, well, to clarify,
yes, and
well, to clarify,
yes.
My argument was never that the independence was granted. I am talking in perspective of Uganda, not in other countries, because we saw many struggles which made the colonialists succumb to pressure because of the military struggle. But for Uganda specifically, it was never granted that, come on, look. But the pressure which was mounted was not enough for this white man to leave the richness, the riches of our country, of part of Uganda. For that, the pressure wasn't enough for them to leave. But what was what sparked off the dialogue for them to start considering the pressure? The dialogue was sparked by the American Marshall Plan immediately after the World War in '48. So they started now negotiating how you will self-govern yourself. You will self-govern yourself on this and this and this and this, until when the discussion ended.
Okay.
But the pressure wasn't enough for them to give us power.
Okay, fair enough. I want us now to move sort of now into post-1962. And the negotiations you're talking about, and even the struggles that have been described, there are some commentators who say the people who were engaged in this struggle and the leaders who took over after independence were just seeking to inherit the very infrastructure that the white man has set up. And therefore did not dismantle the extractive nature of the system, and some have argued that no wonder we are where we are today, where there was a white governor, there can be an African prime minister or president, but what is going on is the same thing. So if maybe you can now take us post-1962, was this self-governance good for the people, and did it work for the people?
Now, the whole kind of independence, it is aimed to have good self-governance. That is the idea, that is the ideology that give us our independence. We govern ourselves, we shall govern ourselves even much better.
Yes.
So 59 years now, a number of provocative questions have been put forth. Are we independent economically? Are we independent politically? Are we independent socially? Or it was a change of a color from a white man to a black man. But the exploitation has been going on with the aid of a black man. That is the question today. Those are provocative questions that every one of us should be asking ourselves, or that any of us and other people, our viewers, are asking themselves right now. It brings us to...
And we want to hear some answers from you.
Yes, it brings us to the new colonialism. Immediately after the colonization, the granting of the independence, the white man comes back in a different fashion, an indirect rule which should be implemented by your own. So immediately after the independence, we saw Africa being swept by a number of military coups, a number of undemocratic change of governance. We saw here in Uganda, the army commander, President the General Idi Amin Dada, took over the government and overthrew President Milton Obote. But we shall remember that when Milton Obote was agitating for the independence of South Africa, when he was in England, he was told that some of these people making noise for us here will not return to their countries. All of these military coups were engineered by our former colonial masters, were engineered in England. Why are they engineered? Why did they participate in the sweeping away of the true African leadership? Modibo, the works of the Modibo Keitas were very wonderful. Sankara and others, Samora Machel and many others were incredible. Why did their armies, again, Patrice Lumumba here in Congo, why did their armies again turn the other back on the great work they are doing for their country?
One could say because they failed to rein in on their armies.
Of course, it's not about training their
capacity.
No. Of course, we know. You have read reports, you have read many resources that these countries, the presidents were overthrew by their army commanders who had the backing of the former colonial masters. So this answers the question that so to date, by the way, we still live under the influence of the political influence of our colonial master to date. And if you are following the current political dynamics in Africa, military coups are coming back slowly by slowly. And these military coups are also in support, they are being supported by the former colonial masters. Why is it they are targeting a change of governance? It is because they do not want us, they still do not want us to be politically independent. When you are politically independent, you make an economic independent decision and a social independent decision. And being that the fact that we are not 59 down on the road, we cannot authoritatively say that we are politically independent. It means also we are not economically independent. We do not have control over our economies. These are the economies which are being fed on the nations. And the lady here next to me was pointing out the issue of the debt. These debts and the IMF was created specifically to have these countries indirectly have debt traps. Because we shall see that even countries which have deliberately refused to borrow, they have been compelled to borrow. A country has gone to war with other European countries just because it has taken long without borrowing.
Yeah, but so don't you think that that's an excuse? Because borrowing, some people have argued, loans are a normal thing. All wealth people, wealth entities borrow. Even the United States of America, which is a superpower, is highly indebted. Well, way more than how you are indebted here. So,
well, the answer is borrowing is okay. But the situation in which some of our African countries are in right now, you cannot authoritatively say that they are borrowing because they want for the goodness of their countries. Yes, because Libya had taken a number of years without borrowing, and this was one of the issues which was tabled by the giants of European Union and IMF. Why is this country so rich? Of course, you have appreciated the economic hitman, the book called called Economic Hitman. You have read it. You know how our African countries have been hit economically to remain subjects to the what? To the colonial power.
yes, thank you very much, Councillor Kiberu.
Maybe also to talk about
one more point.
if the other provocative question is, are we socially independent as a country 59 years down on the road? The answer is no. It is because today we have been hit by a discussion of homosexuality, on how to grant, whether to grant them their rights or not. These are some of the terms which have been addressed by other countries, European countries, that if we do not recognize the rights of, but we know socially in our communities that it is an abomination to have a community where you will give your son to Moses' son and they get a marriage certificate. But such organization of our community isn't cared about. What they care about,
of course, the argument is that it's in the realm of human rights. They are saying your position that you cannot is repugnant. If these are two adult males who have chosen to get married, why should you meddle in their business?
I will quote President Museveni. For us, we do not oppose homosexual, but we oppose its promotion.
So
why do you
okay?
Why do you go ahead if you say that it is a human right to promote it?
Yeah, if it's a human right, why not promote it?
Why are you promoting?
Why not
why are you promoting my son to marry your
Because
son?
I think it's a good thing.
It's a good thing?
Yeah.
Of course, in our social setting as a country, we cannot agree that it is a good thing. But because
Yes.
we are not fully independent, we cannot make independent decisions on ourselves. We have these things turned around.
Yeah.
The law was passed, and later it was
Okay, thank you very much.
It was repealed by the court.
Thank you very much, Kiberu. Time is really on our case, and some of these discussions are very exciting. But let me pick Judith's mind, and then we take a short break. So, Judith, you stated, and it seems many people agree with you, that it appears we are not independent, that, you know, independence came through the front door and disappeared through the back door. And I'm just wondering, is this not scapegoating? Uganda or African countries were not the only ones that were colonized. Many other countries were colonized. In fact, some of them, like South Korea, more brutally. They have since organized themselves and taken charge of their affairs. Why is it that Ugandans or Africans, you know, keep crying and, you know, saying we are not independent? We are not, why can't you struggle for your independence as a people to self-determine? Why can't Ugandans assert themselves and you just keep whining?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. Now, my other colleagues side with me on that issue that we could be independent, but we are so dependent on other countries. Now, the question, to answer your question, why is it, did you ask why are we still dependent on all those countries?
Yeah, so it seems like there is a conspicuous agreement among you, my panelists, that we are not independent. And you know that independence, we are not really independent. And you know that independence, as we have heard from Moses, is struggled for. You struggle and take your space. So why is it so? What happened? Why have we not taken the rightful position we should take?
To answer you directly, I think it's the people on top that make decisions for us. Like the state or the governance or the government of Uganda, those are the people that decide whether to, for example, to take up those loans and all. Let me remind you that I think in July, our Minister of Finance stated, I think my mind serves me right, if we have 54% debt as Uganda. 54 means he was actually crying out like, that's why we're being imposed on tax on mobile money, on anything. Now I hear I think they're proposing to take money from the bank if you're not using it. Imagine that. Just, I think they're trying to settle their debts and whatever, which is not, I mean, to a local person like me in Uganda, I think I'm not, it doesn't even, it affects me directly or even indirectly. But I think our people, our leaders, I don't want to pinpoint people. Our leaders have a role to play in making us really independent. Starting from our usual systems in Uganda. If you go on the road right now, people are driving past curfew, and some bars are open and operating, but when you meet people on the road, they'll just give you kidogo and you just move on. Like, the systems are not operating very well, be it the institutions, the schools, the hospitals. Like, our systems are really not operating right, and because if your leader, if the leader is not, how can I say it? If the leader is not imposing those direct, maybe ways to implement the ways how this all the system should operate, then I mean the system has to go down.
Why can't you kick them out? If the leaders are not working for you and you're serious people, but your leaders are not serious, why don't you kick them out?
I think we'll spend a whole day listing 1, 2, 3. I mean, It's a whole list, so
It's a full cycle. The youth roundtable. Yeah, of course, as you can tell, the discussion is getting hotter, and soon we shall hit hottest. But we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, expect a further analysis of the state that Uganda is in, and maybe suggesting on where do we now go as we approach the 60th anniversary. See you soon. Welcome back. Before we went off for the break, we had looked at the history, we had entered post-independence Uganda. We now want to come to the current status of the country. And I'm going to start with you, Mugisha. Before we went off, I had asked her if the consensus, which seems to be between Judith and Malik, is that we're only independent on paper, but not in reality. Why are we like that? So maybe I would pose the same question to you. Are we independent or not? And if we are not, why are we not independent? Why haven't we struggled to have our independence?
Okay, thank you so much. I would answer that in a little bit using two technicalities. One, are we really independent? We're going to celebrate the 59th birthday of Uganda as an independent state. That means if we were not independent, we would be now looking at, or would be hearing statements like, we are in a struggle for our independence. We would hear statements like, we are now making this coalition because we want self-rule. Or the situation and scenarios in here, Uganda, would be more or less the same or equivalent to those that existed pre-1962. If then that is not what we have, why do we still have a question of whether we are independent or not, even in the current era? Then it means that what we took or we received in 1962, which represented independence, could not be doing the real essence of independence. That now is a time for the citizens of the country to differentiate ideality from reality. Starting from there, you would ask, why is it, if you have been so keen, you'd wonder, why is it that the system in which the British or the colonial masters used to govern the protectorate or to govern the colony, in particular Uganda, seemingly looks the same as to what the leaders that picked the independence from them are using today? Because literally someone is going to tell you from an open view, will say that exactly what the rest were doing is what our own are doing, just that we have a change of faces. That is why someone will pose a question and say, are we independent? And will be supported by another saying, no, we are not independent. Because what happened then still happens today, though in a very subtle manner, and being done by our very own. Allow me to say that Uganda was overfed on breast milk of indirect rule. Being a product of indirect rule, therefore, it became a little bit hard for us as civilians to accept that we have independence. Why? Still, when you want communication to be effective, use a language that is familiar or native. Uganda was much brought on board via the indirect rule. We had absorbed that system in us, and the leaders that were ready then still had grown in that system. It is not a surprise that our leaders had even gone through the British education system. They had seen the governance system of the British. They had brought and learnt the British democracy. That is why almost all our forefathers who were in those days of independence and pre-independence came back with the gospel of political parties as one of the definition of democracy. They would tell you, yes, we now want self-rule, we want periodic elections, because they had benchmarked from the British, who were the masters. Therefore, having a product of a colonial setup from your very own, not even from a different master, it is beyond discussion that they were more likely to do exactly what they've inherited. And that is why even still the British will make a saying and say, it is an English saying that like father, like son. I don't want to say that it is 100%, whether in biology or whatever, but there is a reason as to why that came into existence. So much of the things they did thereafter independence had to be, if not copycat, at least too much relevance from the British system.
So Robert, I see that you're being very choosy with your diction, and I'm just wondering, the question is simple, are we independent or not?
Good. I may not be choosy as such, but just that I love detail. We are independent, but the degree to which we are independent will vary depending on the observer.
So where would you place it if it's a scale of 10 or 100?
Generally, beginning with independence as a question of its own, and I think generally after the discussion, we are underscoring.
We are underscoring. Yes. We are below average, in your view.
Yes.
Which then sends me to the question I asked her. Why is it so? What factors have got us performing below average, yet other people who are colonized elsewhere have been able to come out and shake off the shell of colonialism and build beyond. In fact, some of them to levels where they are now also aspiring to become colonial powers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I had hit a little bit of that in my introduction of the second phase after the break, when I said that having been brought up in a certain environment.
They were too.
I want to make my submission, sir. Mm-hmm. Having been raised in such an environment, the leaders that I'm talking about now had to find that much of the work they were doing for the beginner or for starters would be exactly, or if not so much close related to what the masters were doing. But to we historians or history scholars would want to say that now, those same reasons you forwarded for agitation of independence, what happened thereafter? After attaining that independence, yes. Why did you lose the track? Yes. Good. Now, it is good to think, but when you think, they say it is good to dream. By the way, everyone dreams. And we are always encouraged to dream. But when you dream and you do not wake up, it is also bad. So by then, we looked at them as the shades of light. They were the ones showing us light. You know, you people, let's come together. Let us come for a general cause. But one thing that I said, the indirect rule had become so much into us that even the subjects had developed that side effect and that mannerism of saying, since they are the people in control, they have all the power. Because even when those colonialists were here, it reached a moment of saying they are the ones that are in it, until the people they were collaborating with had to disarm a little bit and agitate for the independence. Now that is where we see those of Milton Obote and the rest of the colleagues coming in. So having been given the independence and getting that excitement as Ugandans, we are now independent. Where did it go wrong? Why are we having such discussions today? Because had everything gone as per the plan, we would be discussing very different things right now. So that means they lost the torch along the way. How and why, probably? As I'm glad on the panel I'm having one of the political figures, a former contestant. People always bring the idea And there is nothing that has spoiled the meaning of leadership and politics as ideology. Someone will say, yes, he's my friend, but we have a difference in ideology. But this ideology that you're holding is what you'll come and share to the people. And so as to whether the people subscribe or not now will create a difference in the follow-up, in the performance, and sometimes, depending on numbers, will now tell who becomes who, or who becomes what. So when these leaders come, they are given a chance. They begin operationalizing. I want to say that most of the first works were done in a benchmark or in a way that is far the same as what the former colonial masters were doing, just that we are having different faces here on our land.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now go to you, Moses. You've had the contestation we are having. Are we independent or not? And if not, what went wrong? And I like the fact that you're a member of the National Resistance Movement that has been in power for more than half of the period we are discussing.
Holding a higher office.
Out of the 59 years we are talking about, the NRM has had more than 35 of that. So are we independent or not? And if not, what went wrong? What's wrong?
Thank you, Council. I've read a book by Apollo Makubia. It's entitled Patronage, Plunder, and Protectionism. Makubia argues that prior to independence, the main reasons as to why Ugandans or Buganda fought for independence were two things. One, to empower the king and create an independency around the same office. But two, to limit the influence from the Western powers on the kingdom. So the question is, 59 years later, are we independent of Western influence? I think that to a greater extent, we all agree that we are not exactly independent in that regard. You see, independence to me is like democracy. Kenneth Waltz one time said that democracy isn't only about going to elections. It's about respecting human rights. It's about giving people freedom to express themselves. It's about the freedom to organize, generally. So in the same regard, independence to me is not exactly about the declaration.
The flag.
Yes, about the flag of the Union Jack, for example, coming down, and then that of Uganda going up. Those are symbolic gestures. It goes down to the ordinary people and how they perceive independence. Because, for example, he brought in a very important aspect, which to me I would term as the psychobiography, that our leaders, even when we at least had the declaration of independence, their orientation, their psychobiography was still greatly linked to the British world. For example, our leaders at the time had studied in the British schools. They had lived there for some time. So their psychological orientation, their psychobiography was tuned to think in some way. So even when the independence was, yes, on the visual scale granted to us, the DNA of the leaders still had a very strong attachment to the British way of doing things. So, but also we need to examine the way we got independence. For us to be able to appreciate what happened post-independence, we must understand how did we get independence. To me, and this is what the NRM has tried to rectify, the argument of ideology, that the independence struggles was basically led by the Democratic Party and the Uganda National Congress. Now, the orientation of these parties were, sorry to say, sectarian in nature. So it was not an inclusive struggle. It was basically Buganda and a few Protestant elites who were at the forefront of this struggle. The vast majority of Ugandans were only spectators in this. So we got independence from a non-inclusive point of view. So that means that after 1962, when we should have grabbed the independence and gotten onto the road and quickly transform our country to now create a difference between what was happening before to what we want to see the country develop or transition into, we did not, because the people who were leading that organization, the people who were at the forefront of that movement, were only from a given political class or from a given social class of people. So the vast majority of Ugandans were left out. But if this independence was from the struggle of a nationalistic nature, where everyone was involved in the struggle for independence of this country, probably we would be having a different conversation today. So, but also...
but maybe on that point.
No, first wait, because I'm
I
afraid
hope
I might
don't
lose my
forget
point.
it, because I'm wondering why the others were not involved. Were they not feeling the pinch of colonialism?
Yes, thank you.
Maybe you can tie it in as...
Yes, because we all appreciate that the entry point of colonialism was in Uganda. So even the Captain Frederick Lugards, the Andrew Cohens spent most or majority of that time within the kingdom. So it was purported to be a Buganda thing. So the rest of the country did not feel the struggle passionately. And that is what led to its... and that's why earlier on you said that even when Sir Edward Mutesa was president, his behaviors were still more of a king than of a president. So he was more attached to the Buganda kingdom than he was to the national outlook of the country. But also, we should not be so quick to misunderstand independence. Independence is not about Uganda living in isolation, okay? Because the idea of independence is that, okay, we give you opportunity to govern yourselves, develop yourselves, make decisions that you feel are of your best interest, okay? And that is where one of the principles of the NRM comes in, the argument of the Pan-Africanism, okay? That we are not looking at independence from the point of view of Uganda should be left in isolation to do what it wants. No, because if we are to empower our people, yeah, because part of being independent is to be independent economically. That's why as a party we are pushing for socio-economic transformation. But this transformation involves Uganda partnering with the rest of the world. Because if we are producing cassava, tomatoes, who is going to buy them? If not the Europeans. So if we continuously see the Europeans as our enemies, then who is going to buy our cotton? Who is going to buy our copper, among other local produce that we have as a country? So it's about the general outlook. It's about the orientation to believe that we must achieve economic independence, which to me is the most important thing. The moment Africa and Uganda in this particular case continues to struggle with its economic independence, the people are impoverished, yeah? We are far from having, because, how should I say it? The economic situation in Uganda has made us not even independent from our own parents, okay? We are not independent from our own parents. Then how can we think that we shall be independent from the superpowers of the world? It's impossible, okay? Matanda, Uganda is a country where you find a 25-year-old still calls the dad for money, calls the dad for ABCD. So if at a family level...
Maybe they're calling for a partnership.
No.
You said independence does not mean living in isolation.
No. If at a family level you still depend on your father for money and upkeep, then we are far from having the discussion of our national independence as a country. But also, it's very important to appreciate the role of international organizations, the United Nations. Because because if you read a book by Kenneth Waltz, he says that these international organizations were put in place to create a convergence to the world. Because we know that, yes, whereas UN is there, the world order is anarchic in nature. There is no international executive, there is no international legislature. It is an anarchic state. That is why the Europeans saw it very wise to create a point of convergence, which in this case is the United Nations. But where does the UN get, for example, its funding? Majority of its funding comes from those same Western powers that we're trying to run away from. When we get issues as countries, for example, as Uganda and etc., most times we go and resolve these issues in ICC. Why? Is it because the Europeans understand human rights better than we do?
No, but ICC is an entity where we are part of the formation.
Exactly.
It's not there.
I agree with you.
It is a global organization where we signed the Rome Statute. And
we are a signatory, yes.
Yes.
But you see, the point is to help you understand that we are not independent at all. Because if the Arab Sangs of Kenya, the Uhuru Kenyatas, the Rutos, after the 2007 post-election violence were sanctioned to ICC, as if they didn't have local courts in Kenya, okay? So that shows you how far we are as a continent from independence. We still depend so much on what they bring to us. Oh, ICC is the bedrock of our judicial system.
But you're the one who said independence does not mean
Living in
in
isolation.
isolation.
Yes.
Now, as a global community, we have
Yes.
come together and said there are some crimes that cannot and should not be tried home, that we are interested in as a globe. And therefore, if you commit them, we together formed this court where you can be. That for me looks like partnership.
A court where they're paying the judges, a court where they are facilitating everything. Why couldn't we have an East African court to try the Arab Sangs and the Uhuru Kenyatas? Why did you have to go so quick to look at the international
There is
court?
actually an East African Court of Justice, but allow me, allow me. Yes.
Just before him,
Yes.
on that very issue.
Okay.
Yes, partnership would not be a problem. Being a signatory to the United Nations is not a problem. But from the business perspective, if you tell me you're a partner, then we have equal rights. We are more of associates than a parent subsidiary association. Which means that if we are going into such an organization, if we are in such an arrangement, my view should as well be given audience. I will not sign to be a partner for a conference that I'll just go to stand for a photo moment. That is not a partnership. That if we are going into a meeting, my views are going to be heard and given value. That if we are saying that we have an international criminal court, Uganda as a member state has the right to host and to try a European who is against who is against such a case. Not that always Africans are the ones to be judged abroad.
Yes.
They are not at any moment superior. If that is the case, then they should make it clear that you're entering into this, but not as a partnership, but just as a subscriber.
As a participant.
Well, does it matter where they sit? So if we said let's change the seat of the ICC to Kampala.
On record, has it
Yes,
ever
it
happened?
does.
On
It
record,
does.
has it ever happened?
It does.
If I must go to The Hague
Yes.
for everything, from year one up to the present,
Yeah, so if I can get you right, the two of you, the argument you're making is that the international organizations we have, like the United Nations, the ICC and others, are colonial outfits.
absolutely.
Yes, they are simply institutions that are used to now colonize us, but in a more softer and in a more democratic, at least democratic in quotes, in a more democratic and in a more, there's a word called soft power that if you give me time, I can expound on. You know?
Okay, not now.
Okay, later.
Yes, because
I
have to
I
go
will
to Mr.
re-echo.
Kiberu. And as you re-echo, I would like you also to help us as a student, a PhD student for international relations.
PhD
also,
candidate.
a PhD candidate. Help us analyze the new kid on the block, China, because it looks like you are clamoring as a country and as countries in Africa, you're running to China and, happily welcoming China, and a lot of development is happening. I hope this time around this is a partnership.
I am going to address China and other countries as well. Let me first re-echo on the issue of ICC, which your question seems to be leading in support of the organization. I will agree with my colleagues. It is an international institution put in place to avoid due process and to emphasize colonialism, to punish those who move away from the agenda of colonialism. Because I will not say that you will take me to a court where United States of America does not recognize that it can take her citizens to be tried in that court, and other countries. Because we cannot say that Ugandans will be taken to that court and charged for crimes against humanity and other Africans, while those investigated for the same crimes, but citizens of, for example, the United States of America cannot be taken. Yes, last year but one, President Trump warned the ICC that it will even arrest, you remember that? It will even issue an arrest warrant if any of them dare to investigate the crimes against humanity committed by United States in Afghanistan. Same ICC has deliberately failed to investigate the crimes against humanity committed by Israel and the Palestinian region. So to go to your question again, repeat for me the question.
Yeah, the question was, you see, you're emphasizing that point.
I was emphasizing.
And I was asking that where does this leave China? A new kid on the block. It appears Uganda and many African countries are too happy with China.
And now, let me hit slightly to the background. Why are some of the countries which were colonized, same way as Uganda, have pulled themselves up and developed, and some to the first-class countries, yet Uganda is not yet developed?
Yes.
We shall look at a case study. We have Singapore, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Serbia, because Serbia was also a colony of Australia. Look at Egypt, Jordan, Libya, China, many countries. Because China, at a certain extent actually, it was once occupied by 3 colonial masters at the same time.
Yes.
It was occupied by Japan, UK, Spain, all of them, immediately after the Second Opium War.
And some historical accounts show that the Spanish and the Japanese were too brutal.
Of course.
They could not come
They
close to
exploited the country beyond. But why is it this country, China among, have lifted themselves up to the expectation of their citizens, and we have failed? It is the answer of leadership. Leadership of their countries have left up to the expectation of their citizens. Are they doing what they should do for their people? The answer is yes. Whether they come here and exploit us economically, that's exactly what they should do for their people, to make their country wealthy. But the question is, the African leaders, are they doing what they are supposed to do for her people, for their people? The answer is I doubt. I am not certain whether our African leaders are doing exactly what they should do for our people or for their people in their country. We are seeing a high corruption rates. A president of a country richer than the economic GDP of his country.
Has that happened anywhere?
President of before General Abacha of Nigeria, before he died a natural death. Before he died, his wealth was a quarter of the Nigerian GDP. Yes, Mobutu Seseko was a banker, was very rich. Bokassa of Central African Republic, very, very extremely rich at the expense of their people. That they have failed to recognize that investing in the people, it is the best investment for working. Actually,
but maybe that was unfortunate for those countries. For us in Uganda, we have very humble presidents, just a few cows.
I'm coming to Uganda. I wanted to first appreciate other countries, because at a certain point we were richer than Singapore, we were richer than the United Arab Emirates, and today we are not even close on finding them at the rate they are running, and at the level where they are right now. They have developed. When you look at their education, the education system, the health system, the economic system is favoring their students. Bring back the perspective in Uganda since 1962. We have been having a problem of leadership since 1962. Uganda has had how many presidents? 9 9 presidents. One of them has governed Uganda, I will not say ruled, but has governed Uganda, has led Uganda for 35 years. And others, and others, and others, those 9s. But the question is, did they offer leadership from the beginning, the foundation of the country? Was it to emancipate the country from the colonialists, or was it to work for the colonialists indirectly, even when they didn't know that they were working for them? So the foundation, the reason why some of the countries did develop and us we did not develop is the foundation which was set immediately after the independence. Why do I question the foundation? Go back to the countries which I have mentioned. The foundation led by Lee Kuan Yew was immediately when he took what? When Singapore was getting her independence, not very far away. The foundation he set is the foundation that Singapore is lying upon now. Yes. That the dogma cannot change. This is what we stand for, and everyone who is against it, the country will be against them. China, the foundation led by Chairman Mao. It is the foundation that brought Deng Xiaoping to get China from a steady collapse, just like Soviet Union, to a financially wealthy country. That he was lying on this foundation of led by Chairman Mao.
It is interesting to see a human rights advocate speaking in good favor of Chairman Mao.
Of course, because here we are talking about the country. We are talking about what they did. We are recognizing because Chairman Mao led a fight to decolonize China, most part of China. He led the fight
that left tens of millions.
Of course, every struggle, every independence struggle, which turned to be bloody, claimed life everywhere. Are you putting the blame to the people who fought for their independence, or you are putting the blame to the colonizer, who say that I will not go away until when a certain number of people die? So we cannot put the blame to Chairman Mao, who led the fight to have the country where it is right now, that my president of the country can run to such a $1 billion in loan. So the question is the foundation. Chairman Mao, Lee Kuan Yew, King Hussein of Jordan, the foundation they laid to take away the Britain from Jordan and make a clear, systematic approach, a Marshall Plan for their country of where they should be. That foundation has been what the other leaders have been following, and that's why those countries are like that.
Do you realize none of those countries is on the African continent? What does that say?
No, I'm giving you, I'm pointing them out because they were also colonized. I do not want us. The question,
so there's no African country that was colonized that has such a foundation.
The question is, why are we not like other countries which were colonized?
Only Uganda, or all of us as a continent?
I will put it at Uganda and also at the continental level.
Okay.
Because at the continental level, also Uganda is not the same. It is not the level of development in Uganda is not at the same level with Egypt. And it was not at the same level like Libya. So until when Libya was knocked down, that we can slowly see that it is not among now the wealthy countries.
I'm enjoying this conversation, but if you can just
the question is still even to here on the African continent, why are we not as developed to claim that we are economically independent as Egypt? Why are we? Because we see Gamal Nasser attaining what they call the second independence of Egypt. The foundation he laid transforming Egypt from a subsistence farming economic-based sector to in a fully industrialized country. We saw many decisions he made, which were part of them was to build the Aswan High Dam, which brought a number of complications in the politics of Egypt. Eventually, it led to his death when he died of a heart attack because of such pressure, which amounted to the Britain never wanted to have the Aswan High Dam because one, it will emancipate the economy, hence giving him high clout. Yet he was against all neocolonialism. So the question is, why is it Uganda, 59 years now, has not moved so fast like other countries?
30 seconds.
Other countries. The question is the leadership and the foundation which was not set in place. Today we are moving on the foundation of Dr. Milton Obote. But the question is, was it good to have this country emancipated to a wealthier, economically, socially, politically independent country? The answer is no. So my conclusion,
Yes.
I am certain that at a smaller extent, Uganda is independent. So therefore, we are not fully independent.
Okay, thank you very much. Our time is almost fast spent, and so I ask that we limit part of our submissions and try to compress the wisdom. But to you, Judith, I see you're eating, but I'll be coming to you shortly. Just don't forget your point. All of you seem to be, stuck with this idea of we are not independent. And I pressed some of the panelists to, he says small extent, he says, less than average. And I'm just wondering, what I read and hear about the colonial time, there was no constitution, there were no elections, there was forced labor, people being forced to grow cotton, grow coffee, grow all sorts of things. There was almost no education for the natives, save for training them as clerks to support the colonial enterprise. If I'm to quote some of the statistics our president throws around, the country was not connected border to border with tarmac. There was no electricity. I won't mention the number of TV stations or radio stations. If you look at the revenue that the country was collecting, number of universities, everything, all the indicators, 59 years later for me, seem to be looking good. That point at anything, whether it's infrastructure or education or health, and it looks like we have walked very serious steps and taken very serious strides. How does this harmonize or compare with, you actually started this idea that we are not independent?
How does it harmonize?
Yeah, like, don't you think that it's a contradiction that the argument is that we are not independent, yet
we have done
we are
something.
in charge of our affairs and the sectors, there is evidence of exponential growth. 9 years later, yes.
When you're starting the show, you mentioned something like if it was a person who's 59 old, how would that person be? Clearly, after 59 years, we shouldn't be having this discussion of are we not, we are there. So I think the loopholes that need to be filled, which are they are not actually hard, but it's because of political issues. For example, he mentioned something when he said maybe the leaders need to invest in the people. And maybe if I can link it to our colleague Moses, what he said about we grow a lot of cotton and what, and his point of isolation, Uganda being in isolation, like we need to export. I need to bring it to attention, Mr. that Uganda currently cannot export a lot of things, including maize, including eggs, including beans. And yet, when we go back to have villages. These are the things that we grow a lot. But why don't we export them? Because the value in them cannot be on the market, on the global market, even in the East African market. Now, you need to invest in your people. Tell them what they actually need to grow to, because agriculture is the backbone of our country, right? But have you looked at the financial year 2021-2022? The allocation was allocated, I don't remember the percentage, but it was a very little percentage that was given to agriculture. Unfortunately, the highest percentage goes to the military, and for some reasons I don't know.
Because, let me tell you the reasons. We are a liberal economy that is free market, and so agriculture is the private sector that invests in agriculture. So government invests in security to ensure there is stability, such that you can invest in agriculture. Government will not put money in agriculture to compete with you. But they have gone on to create NADS, to create NARO, to have a ministry that is giving extension services, giving you seedlings, training you, encouraging you to carry out all these sorts of things. Recently they are in Dubai, showcasing some of the products, like milk products, that's seeking to have a market for the products.
I like how you bring it. There's NADS, there's a recent one of, we have introduced. There's another one.
Parish model?
Yeah, parish model.
Parish
Thank you. Thank you. Myoga, NADS and all.
That all shows a government that really wants to support its people.
Have they implemented those things? Why would you bring NADS and then parish model and then Myoga? They are all, if you look at the strategies, they're all more or less the same. So how come the Myoga didn't work? What went wrong with NADS? Why are you bringing it's the fresh, it's just old oil in thank you very much. Because why didn't they work? Because they didn't implement them, and the same thing will apply if you don't change in the, I don't know.
That's what we want to hear. You have to know, because we want you to tell us, what do we have to change? Because
why do you have to change? I think it goes back to our leadership. Because we can't, we keep saying, I'll quote one of them, our dear president, where our minister, is it minister? Atwine, Dr. Twine, didn't...
Permanent Secretary, Minister of Health.
Dr. Twine didn't implement some, I think the beds, buying the beds and all. And then he asked him, why, I told you to buy such a number of beds, why haven't you done that? And the lady just said, we bought less of the number. And our president just said, for you, what is that word? The Uganda word? Said, gem. That's all. What do you do to that? That's all. Like, they don't actually come up to punish or even implement those issues and ideas. Just like that. That's how they live. That's how you keep talking about corruption year in, year out, and there's nothing that is done. Everyone from the top to bottom knows about corruption, but what do people do about it in the actual sense? Nothing. So I think we need an organized way to do our stuff, and on all sectors, so that we can actually be independent.
Yeah, you have been itching, and I want to throw a question to you such that you combine it with what you want to give us. I asked her earlier on this analysis of hers, because she says she agrees with the idea that everything stands and falls on leadership. But I also know that leadership comes from the people. So I'm wondering, if the leadership is not working for the people, where are they? Why can't they sanction and deal with this leadership? So you can answer that question and tie it in with whatever you wanted to share with us.
Well, thank you so much. Because of the interest of time, I'm going to a little bit compress as you asked.
Yes.
Because this is such an interesting topic that actually 1-2 hours may not be enough. My submission would start by saying, for the first leaders, probably the first and the second, I would give an allowance of their behavior even when it was not the best. Because we would say they were benchmarking from a source that had limited alternative. But to the rest that came thereafter, we expected them to have realized the effects of the colonial rule, to have seen how our first leaders from our very own treated them, and to what would have been the ideal. Such that at such a stage where we are, we do not discuss a question of being independent or not, but rather progress and civilization. I initially thought it were only for kids, but I realized it also affects the mature ones at the end. When a baby cries for food, immediately after being fed, you cease hearing the cry. The mothers will tell you their need has been met. But I've seen a kind of connection even in our leadership and politics, that before some people are there, they will really speak out. They will speak and agitate and cause attention and cause a need for action. But once they are there, I don't know whether the duties become much on them. I don't know whether they eat and have much food in the mouth that they cannot have space to speak. We are yet to expound. But when such a scenario happens, now the burden is shifted, ideally, should be shifted now from the leader back to the subjects. Why? The leader to whom you're blaming right now has a full mouth. After realizing that he cannot speak, then find someone whose mouth is still empty or has little to speak. What does that mean? If independence came our way, and we welcomed it, and among the things that came along was self-rule and democracy, as we uphold and as we praise, then how do we interpret it to we as the citizens? If we said we are taking up independence, if we are saying we are taking up a democracy, are we participating in the democracy of our country? Now, the cause goes far back to our founders, that when they were setting up a system for us to follow, they set a system in a way that you're going to be in a position, and once you're there, this is how you will run your system. Do this when it is time to be done. And among the tools that our leaders got was finding the various ways of silencing those who have what to say. From government to government, that has happened in different ways, but the cause and results are the same. Why? As I said in the beginning, they benchmarked from the very people who had the very tactics. And so doing it and implementing such a strategy to me would not be a surprise. But now, why should we, who have seen it, who have recognized that in history, allow it to be taken to the next generation? And that is where the concern should dwell. That yes, you realize when you're hungry and you cry, you're given the food, your cheeks are full, you cannot speak. But now that you still have a chance of speaking, your mouth is not yet full. How are you utilizing that time and opportunity? The other system of feeding the mouth has made a way that the civilians and the Republicans are going to be in a state of lack, are going to lack the civic information, are going to lack the necessary knowledge which they need to sustain themselves economically, politically, and in any other way that directly affects their leadership. Such that when a leader is put in a position, is going to be the source of solutions. And that is wrong, and it is the approach that our leaders have taken. That once the leader is instituted in a given position, they are looked at as the savior. In actual sense, leaders should only do the mobilization, the implementation, and the coordination, not the provision. When leaders have now developed such a trend, personally, I would shift the responsibility from the leader now to the subjects. Because if you realize that your leader is one of such a kind, then devise means of dealing with him. How come we got ways of dealing with our colonial masters? How about our own? How do we fail to deal with them? It's because you have failed to get or to establish the reason. And so to those that can still find out, be given an opportunity to this civic education. Know what your duties and responsibilities are, what your contribution is to the running of the affairs of the country. know what democracy means, such that you are in the right position to agitate for what you want, so that it can be done, and these questions will cease. My submission, we as the people, as the civilians, as the Republicans, as the citizens of the country, if we believe that the people we are dealing with are familiar people, are our very own, we have one, we are the people who put them in power. Therefore,
I hope so.
I hope so too.
wait a minute, wait a minute.
No, that is the agenda, that the people should put the leaders in power.
I beg to be protected. When these people are implementing, whether partially or not, the democracy which we have, because one of the systems that people brought in with independence was setting up of structures. Whether these structures are working or not functioning may be a discussion for a later day, but it affects still the status in which we are. That these people that we are having on board are going to have these periodic elections, have structures set up. You have the legislature, you have the executive, you have the judiciary, we have them. But after taking your case to court, you now go back and say, we know the results. Why? We have believed in the non-functioning system that we adopted, and we feel we have no say about it, yet we had a say in a time when we literally had kind of, can I call them handcuffs?
Okay,
We were
Robert,
handcuffed.
you threw in a spanner and we interrupted you.
Yes.
But I like the direction you have taken, because that's where we are going. Our time is fast spent. We are now moving towards the question of which way should we take. This is the youth roundtable. If everything remains constant, we are the leaders of tomorrow, and tomorrow is now. So which direction do we then take? And I think that's the direction you are taking, and that's now what I want to hear. If each one of us can have about a minute to share with us which way now.
Thank you very much. Having realized and diagnosed that, I would want to welcome all of you, that we go deep into the diagnosis before we do the prescription, such that we are sure we are prescribing the right medicine for the right disease. Not necessarily dealing with the signs and the symptoms, but rather the cause. Because if you develop a cancer and you do not treat right from the source, you'll cut off all limbs and you'll just remain a substance that has no health. If we have realized that the problem is with us collectively, because today I am the way I am, but I believe tomorrow I'm among the leaders, because I solidly believe leadership is not only restricted to position. In the first place, I believe I'm my own leader. I lead and direct my programs, how I conduct myself, I'm a leader. And through my actions, I influence someone, therefore I'm a leader. That even when I'm trusted with a given position of power, I should still portray that skill in me, not necessarily eating and feeding my chicks to the extent of speaking normal. Therefore, what we need, in my submission and in my opinion, is what I would call a holistic transformation. Holistic transformation in literal terms is a change, but a noticeable change. That this change is not only about an individual. Because when they say, let us go for elections, and we fix our eyes on a president, what are we changing? You're only changing a human being, but the position remains, the duties remain, the roles remain. And so we expect just a substitute, but literally activities to remain running the same way. Then what is this holistic transformation that we're talking about? That the whole system has to be revised and swept. One, the political system. That if we are bringing up these leaders, which kind of leaders are we now grooming? I'm glad that on the panel I'm seeing young men and young ladies have been following. At least on every round table there's a lady and a different one. I have a hope that if the people that we are seeing now continue with the spirit. The problem is that there's always that problem of going when you're hungry and after eating you keep quiet. That's the problem.
President Obama says we campaign in poetry but govern in prose. So there are realities maybe that they meet there.
Then that means they are not recognizing the need that is existing in their country. Because if you are a true leader and you're seeing the need, you advocate for it. The reason as to why this transformation, to sum it up, because I was thinking we have it education-wise, even religious, political.
You can summarize it for us in 30 seconds.
Very good.
Yeah.
So that politically, we do not take this leadership as a personal responsibility, but rather to be a representative and to pass on that which your people must have. To be a leader should not be a provider.
So, your prescription is holistic transformation. And we have picked that. So
yes.
maybe just tell us how.
I'm breaking it
yes,
down.
Yes.
Because when I have that in mind, I'm going to look at a system where, let's say, we're talking about education. Let this education be centered on the students or the learner's interest. Let this education focus on the current reality rather than creating a graduate of a very good storage capacity than an implementation personnel. That the testing or the exams you're sitting are testing how much you have retained in class rather than how much you can contribute to the growth of your country. That if we have such an education system, we are provided with the people who are going to bring new knowledge on board. Talk about the religious and social sector. Personally, I call religion a tool of discipline. That in this religion, let all the religious leaders impact good morals in the people.
But sir, well, the time is really up, and I really want our viewers to make sense of your recommendations. When you say the religious leaders should impact a sense of morality, that's what they do. That's what they also say. So what's specific? What's different?
When the morality that I'm talking about, when the morals are not depicted in you as our leader, it will be hard to preach something else and you do something different.
So they should lead by example.
By example.
Thank
and
you very much.
After,
I fear.
Finally.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yes.
Finally. I think I'm the only one who has not asked for extension of time. Finally, when this is implemented, with all leaders we have at the various categories, whether at school level, religious level, chairman, LC1, when these leaders have been entrusted with this authority, let them be people who will set a pace for the next generation. But above all, with the people, let us be the change we would want to see in the future. Let us be the implementers.
Thank you very much. Personal responsibility, holistic transformation.
Thank you.
Kidega, you have about a minute to show us some direction.
Thank you very much, comrade. You see, you had asked a question that I had loved to answer, that why didn't Uganda jumpstart itself the way other African countries did? And just give me 1 minute to answer that. You see, we must cross-examine the ambition that Britain had. When Britain came to colonize Uganda, they found Germany in place. But they signed the Anglo-German Treaty that saw German exit Uganda and pave way for Britain. So the ambition that Britain had was too enormous, in that even when we had independence, they still kept on influencing our leaders. Two, what we should have done was we should have there and then begun to build the republic.
Yep.
You know, chapter 2 of our constitution is about the republic.
The foundation.
A national language, symbols that represent Uganda. We should have deliberately fostered the republic. For example, when Tanzania struggled, what they first did was to establish a national language, Kiswahili. Okay? Tanzania has about 160 tribes, more than that even. But because Kiswahili was their national language, it was a figure of a republic. It brought them together. We didn't do that. Tanzania, the first stanza of their anthem is Mungu Ibariki Africa. God bless Africa. For us here, it is, "Oh Uganda, may God uphold thee," in English. Okay? So we did not understand that building the republic meant that we had to transform ourselves generically, have a national language, and let people have a point of cohesion. So that we didn't do, but I think we can still do. We need to establish a national language, be it Kiswahili, whatever it is. Let people have a common point of convergence and a point of unity. Two, we must orient the people deliberately. And this is what we didn't have back then. Because even when we had independence, we saw parties like Kabaka Yeka, okay? Those parties were disoriented ideologically. Because if you're looking at uniting a country, why have a party called Kabaka Yeka? Okay? That is why parties like the one I subscribe to, the National Resistance Movement, is encouraging inclusion and a nationalistic outlook of its citizens. Conclusively, what I think needs to be done also is the political will must be there. Why do we still have Prince Charles Drive, for example, in Uganda? Why do we still have these roads being named after colonial masters? Why?
Some people say they made their contribution.
It is a constant
In
reminder.
fact, some extremists say that some sectors
Mm.
performed better during the colonial times than they are now.
To me, it is a constant reminder of their participation in disenfranchising our people.
Okay.
Yeah, but also it's an aspect of we haven't moved on. We must move on from them. Let the roads be named after local people who struggled for independence. There are so many of them. The Musazis, there are so many. Name them.
At least we have Ben Chwanuka's
Yes,
history.
there are so many. So I think the political will needs to be emphasized. Okay? And through that, we build the republic, a national language, popularize symbols of the republic, like the national emblem. Let every Ugandan know that this is our national language, which should not be English, should be something else. Localize even the constitution. Let the constitution be in Acholi. Let us be able to take back all these documents and all these colonial tools of governance to the local people.
Anything around the boundaries?
The boundaries, actually, I was attending a training and I got to realize that there was a time when the two brothers were leaders in two different countries, the Aworis.
Yeah.
Mudi Awori was vice president to Mwai Kibaki, and at the same time, Agre Awori was the minister here in Uganda. So to me, the boundaries, those are all colonial boundaries. We are one people. We are Africans. Okay? Those are colonial boundaries. The people, we have laws in Kenya, we have laws in Uganda. What is the difference? So even the colonial boundaries,
them?
That is why our party is pushing for an East African Federation and the unity of Africa. Let's not have all these boundaries. They were given to us by the colonial masters. We must kick them out.
Thank you very much. Your party has been in power for 35 years. The rate at which it's pushing is interesting. But allow me give Malik his 1 minute to
conclude. On conclusion, I'm going to re-echo the problem. I talked about it in my last submission. It has been recorded by my colleagues. I'm recalling it again. The problem we have right now as to why Uganda is not on the same speed and the same pace as other countries which were colonized at the same time and got independence at the same time, it is because of leadership. Leaders are not gods and givers. The likes of, in the like fashion of a Moses with a rod and staff, who will hit his rod on the river, and the river will separate with abracadabra, with the pronunciation of abracadabra. Leadership is all of us. It's not a one-man show. It's all of us. As great Emerson, as the great American great Emerson said, that don't complain about the dirt, the dirt in the world. Sweep your front yard and let the others sweep their front yard, and the law behold. And when we all sweep, the world will be clean. And on a spiritual dimension, Mother Teresa said, don't complain about the darkness in the room. Light up the candle and let the other light up the candle. And when the candle is light up, the darkness will be conquered. Morality cannot be legislated. It is only behaviors which can be regulated. So let our leaders have the morality and know that they are doing whatever they are doing for the good of the people. For that simple truth, after knowing it, we shall emancipate our country and it will run on the same pace like the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith. You have the honor to, put the icing on this conversation.
Thank you very much. And I want to maybe divide it into two ways to answer your question of how and we can do this. First, I believe from my stand that we are actually independent, but so dependent on very many ways. Allow me bring in this issue. Uganda has currently received an invitation to sign the Energy Charter Treaty, and which I believe does more harm than good. And I think we don't have to sign because of this other country has brought in this, and they want maybe, they want minerals, they will provide funds. We have an option. We can say no, and then we maybe have other policy alternatives that can be done on that particular issue. We have alternatives that can be done, and then on the issue of maybe mismanaging funds, mismanaging power, politics, and mismanaging the environment. Apparently, I think in 1990, Uganda had a forest cover of 24% forest cover. In 2021, we have 8% forest cover, meaning we are actually mismanaging everything, including the environment. But what can you do? Come on, plant more trees. Bugoma Forest is on the verge of being broken down right now. What are you doing in that aspect? We can actually go and re-strategize all these companies, all these entities, and re-strategize and make Uganda a better place. Happy Independence Day, Uganda.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was an actual icing. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Malik. Thank you, Robert. And thank you, Moses. You have a katalekeka? No, you don't. You have been a wonderful panel. I'm sure our viewers have picked a lot of insights. Okay, the Youth Roundtable is always honored to bring very experienced, very knowledgeable panelists. But in the end, we are indebted to you, the viewers, who stick with us and listen. And we ask you, Independence Day is coming up in 4 days. Please go on YouTube, put your comments, go on Twitter. Let's discuss where are we as a country and which way should we take. As a Youth Roundtable, you have had our recommendations. You can add more, you can expound them more. But please, we want to see you more on our YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and all these platforms. We believe that together, when we put our ideas together and when we act together like we have been advised, we can actually build a better country for God and my country.